we go. Lesson 39, electricity in the body. We'll be able to explain the effects of electricity on the human body, because ultimately we've been talking about these safety elements, but it's a bit weird to talk about safety elements. We haven't really talked about why is it important to protect our body from electricity. What happens when we do get shocked? So to bring into the idea of what happens when we do get shocked, let's talk about, well, what did we talk about last time leading up to this? Leading up to this, we were talking about grounding electricity. We said that the important parts of grounding electricity is that in every power point there is a live wire, which is 230 volts. And that's going to give yourself, it's pretty much the same as a 230 volt DC battery, but it's alternating current. And it's, yeah, one side goes from 340 volts to negative 340 volts, but it does it so quickly that the average is about 230. We call this terminal the live terminal, whereas the other terminals have 0 volts. Now, I didn't actually say this properly last time, but I will say it now. This wire here is the active wire, right? It goes into the whole network, into the whole system, and then you've got one wire that goes back out to the electrical pole, and that's a neutral wire. So I missed this last time. I didn't say there was another wire that went back out to the street, but that's another reason why I gave you that question. It's just to be like, yeah, one of these wires goes back out to the street. So you've got 2 wires coming in here. So you've only got 3 points on your PowerPoint. So if you've got 3 points on your PowerPoint, but only 2 wires, you might ask yourself, well, where is this extra wire coming from? And what is it doing? So what that extra wire is doing is it's being a ground wire, and the ground wire connects to this copper stake or whatever this metal stake is that's outside of your house. The metal stake acts as like a grounding stake, and it gives the place really low resistance for the electricity to go down. Provides an emergency instead of the current going through your body. The example that I showed you for that was, I told you about the different colors. The example I showed you was the toaster here. I said if the wire breaks in the toaster and instead of going to the neutral, it accidentally went to, whoops. Instead of going to the neutral, it went to the casing. But instead of going through the casing through your body to the ground, it'll rather go through the earth cable to the ground. It's just a little bit less resistance, which makes sense. I showed you here is the wire. One thing I didn't show you was this, because we ran out of time just when we were about to go through this stuff, and I sort of briefly explained it, but I didn't quite get very far. This here is a circuit. This here is called double insulation. What you'll find is that not all electrical cords have 3 prongs. Some electrical cords only have 2 prongs. And to ensure these devices are safe, even though they don't have a grounding wire, what they do is they make them what they call double insulators, which means that they have 2 layers of insulation. You can tell that they've got 2 layers because they've used this symbol here, this double square symbol. And they're usually made of plastic, and they usually don't contain water. They're usually pretty, like, you usually can't see any metal parts at all, because they want to make sure that they're, completely safe. Now, I actually wanted to spend a little bit of time before I continue with this. I wanted to quickly show you that some of you guys actually, one of the homework tasks that I gave you guys, if I can jump over here, to do was to find some of these devices. Now, not many people have finished it yet, because ultimately I put it up over the weekend, so you guys may not have seen this because I put it up after the lesson, so that was a bit silly of me. But still, if we open up, I want to show you, I guess, the one person that has found these. Daniel, you might have already finished it. Good job, Daniel. So let's grab a look here. What I wanted to show you was this. So this looks like a charger for a phone, and if you look here, you can see just in that little bit there is a double square. Well, the reason why I chose to show Daniel's answer to this is because Daniel actually found his grounding wire that goes to his house. It's really good. Down the bottom, I've got my example. So this is what I found for my own example. And I've also found one which had a double insulator, again, a double square. So now you know what that symbol means. But I also found my grounding wire, which is a bit hard to see, but it is just a little bit thing tucked into the ground. So it's going to be really important that you find that. Okay, it doesn't have to be like, it might be weird. You might only have a little nub to show you where the grounding wire is, but I'd love to see it. I would love to know that you guys can find your grounding wire for your house. Back to the lesson. So that's what a double insulator looks like. That's what double insulation means. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about briefly is grounding in a car. Now, the reason for this is I was always confused by this because, and I think that not many people explain it, probably because it's not really like, it's relevant, but it's not the same thing. But I still want to show you anyway, even if it isn't the same thing. So in this circuit here, we've got a car. The car's got a big battery at the front. And that battery has a positive wire on it. And that positive wire can hook up to all the electrics, so to your radio, to your air conditioner, to your headlights, whatever. We've got this one wired up to the back indicators of this car. Now, after it goes to the back indicators of the car, it then connects a wire to the frame of the car. And then the other end connects a wire back to the battery from the frame of the car. So the frame of the car, the metal part of your car, actually acts as a massive wire. So when you're sitting in the car, you've got electrons running around you inside the car. And I guess the reason why, and when you have a problem with your wire, they actually sometimes call it, you have a problem grounding your wire. Now, what you have here is, you might think to yourself, well, why don't you get electrocuted? Because there's so much metal that the electrons can go through. They're not going to go through the human body. So it's not the same way as grounding as in the example we already talked about with the house, because in that it's an AC current, whereas it's a DC current. But it's sort of the similar idea, is that it's going to a much larger place. And if there is a short circuit, let's just say the wire breaks and it touches the metal frame, it doesn't matter too much because that's where the electricity was going to go anyway. There is sometimes a little wire that goes down from the car that touches the ground, which is like a grounding wire, but it's more of a grounding wire for static electricity. It's a way to get rid of excess static electricity. Ultimately, if the electrons want to have a choice, and it's like, do I want to go to the ground or do I want to go to the negative terminal of the battery? They're going to go to the negative terminal of the battery. So that little wire that comes out is like an anti-static wire. So next up, what does electricity do to the human body? That's the question today. Well, the first part that we need to talk about, if we're going to talk about what electricity does to the human body, is we're going to talk about the nervous system. So the nervous system is the body's message system, and the nervous system runs off electricity. Your nervous system sends information via small electrical discharges, like wires in a house. So like one nerve will connect to another nerve by a small electric impulse, like a small flash of electricity. They do send information chemically down a nerve, but between nerves, between neurons, they send short little bits of electricity. Now, these pieces of electricity don't just, stimulate, like send information. They could also stimulate muscles. They can also get muscles to move, like contract. And that's actually why I was showing that dumb video at the start, was to show, hey, if you apply electricity to two sides of a muscle, you can get that muscle to contract. So especially if you apply an external supply of current, especially AC, this can disrupt the message system. It can disrupt disrupt how your muscles move. And we call that, especially if it's AC. DC does it too, but especially AC. So that's why, you can pretty much take over a muscle, take over a body system using electrical impulses. Now, when you get an external electrical supply, when electricity hits your body from outside, you receive something called an electric shock. Now, you can have like a little electric shock. The electric shock can be something just as bad as, ow, I zapped myself off from static electricity. I accidentally touched the car and like a little spark that hurt a little bit, but not like whatever, to the point where you have an electric shock so hard that you pass out. Now, this is important. I actually never knew the difference here, but I thought when I found out, that was actually really interesting. Electrocution is where you receive a shock that causes you to die. Now, you might say, well, no, how is that? Why were you interested by that? Well, because whenever I talk about electrocution, I always ask people, have you ever been electrocuted before? And that's actually a wrong statement. You can't actually ask someone if they've been electrocuted before, because if they've been electrocuted before, they'd be dead, right? Electrocution means that you die. So ultimately, you don't, unless you're dead, no one gets electrocuted. You only get an electric shock. Of course, you can get a really, really bad electric shock, but it's just different. So what kind of voltages can kill you? 115 volts DC will kill you. Whereas 32 volts AC can lead to electrocution. So both of those two voltages can lead to your death. But what I found interesting is this: you can still survive a static shock as high as 25,000 volts. So just by walking on carpet and accidentally touching a doorknob and getting an electric shock, you can experience 25,000 volts. So here's the interesting predicament here. If you can survive 25,000 volts, right? If you can survive 25,000 volts, why can't you survive 115 volts DC? It feels like this number is bigger, so you should get a static shock, you should die. This number isn't just bigger than this number. This number is huge compared to the other number. So why can you survive a massive shock of 25,000 volts, but a smaller one of 115 can maybe send you to your grave? The reason for that is there are many other factors that change the severity of a shock that, affect whether or not you get shocked and die, or whether or not you get shocked and it just hurts a little bit. Some of these factors are, oh, by the way, that's spelled wrong. Eclectic, no, it's electric, sorry about that. The voltage. So I've just sort of talked already about the voltage. Obviously, the greater the voltage, the more the shock. Do you experience a voltage, a really high voltage? The higher the voltage, the more likely it is that you could be in trouble. We've talked about now, but the other things that affect whether or not you get an electric shock or you get electrocution include the resistance of your body, like how much resistance is there for your body to stop the electricity getting in. You know, the other ones might be the current. Is it a high current or is it a low current? The next one is the path of the electricity. Even if the electricity does get in your body, where does it go through your body? And the last one's the time of exposure. How long have you been electrocuted for? Was it a couple of seconds or was it a couple of minutes? Was it a couple of milliseconds? These factors here, we're going to go through each one now in a pretty quick succession, but we're going to talk about each of these now. When we're finished with them, you guys should be able to get a rough idea about what sort of things change how you experience electricity. Let's talk about the first one, resistance in your body. So, sorry, okay, so in your body, you will have a resistance. Remember, of course, resistance, it's pretty much depends on, it will determine how much current can go through your body. Sorry, another typo there, my apologies. So remember, resistance affects voltage drop. It affects, remember, the more resistance, the harder it is for electricity to flow. And that's something you want. If you're being electrocuted, you want electricity to have as hard a time to get through you as possible. So the first thing that we talk about when we talk about electric shocks, we talk about the dry skin. Dry skin has 1,000,000 ohms of resistance. So if you get electric shock, first thing that's going to happen is your body's going to drop most of the voltage over your dry skin. The next thing that you can have is, of course, well, what happens if you have wet skin, like you have wet hands? Well, then if you have wet hands, it drops to 1,500. It drops by 1,000 times, 1,000 times smaller. So if you have wet hands, you accidentally touch an electric cable, well, then you're probably in for a lot more. Because, of course, we know that water is a good conductor. So if you start rubbing water over your hands, then you're going to make yourself a much better conductor. Last is 500 ohms if you're completely submerged. If you're in a swimming pool or if you're in a bathtub, it's really bad. If you get electrocuted, we get an electric shock. This is one of these examples where whenever you see people that, they try and use a hairdryer in the bath, and then, they accidentally drop the hairdryer and then they get electrocuted because they're submerged in water, so they have really, really low resistance. Another thing to keep in mind with resistance of the body is that you can artificially increase it. If you wear gloves, then you will artificially increase the resistance. If you wear rubber shoes, then you'll artificially increase your resistance because you make it harder for the electricity to go through your feet. Or if the electricity is already in your body, it won't go into your body because it's going to go, well, I have to go through this rubber to get to the ground. Am I going to go through this rubber to get to the ground? Probably not. So there are a lot of factors that govern it. Oh, I just found the pen. Thank Christ. So what I mean by that is, so let's just say this is a human being here. Let's go here and then go like that. And let's just say they touch an electrical wire. Then if this is rubber here, the electricity might go, well, that's going to be a path of really high resistance to try and get through this rubber. I'd rather instead keep going down this electrical wire to the ground because it's a bit easier. So this is just a way that you can change. That's usually why you'll see electricians who have rubber soles. I will point out one interesting fact though. A voltage of 600 volts is high enough energy that it can not just it can actually burn the skin. Now, if you burn your skin because you get electrocuted, then you've created a new open wound, which means the electricity can go through it, so it's going to drop the resistance. That's the other thing as well. If you've got cuts or open wounds, then its electricity is going to behave a bit differently. It's going to have lower resistance. If you manage to get electricity into someone's mouth or something, then yeah, that's going to be a bit different as well, because it's going to have a lot lower resistance on the inside of your body. But yeah, that's sort of the thing, is like if you do have a high enough voltage, then it doesn't really matter if you've got like dry skin. You're just going to get electrocuted, burn the skin, create some, a place for the electricity to get in a lot easier. So that's what resistance does to your body. Next I wanted to talk about is current. What does current do? So inside of your body, an electric current can affect your whole body. So this is on now, we're talking not about what current does to the skin. Let's just say now you've touched something that's got, and it's got like it's still, even though you've got this really, really high resistance, it's still got a high enough voltage that some current is going to get into your body. If you have 9 milliamps across your chest, you'll receive a shock. You'll hurt, but won't be the end of the world. If you get 18 milliamps across your body, that can cause difficulty in breathing. And that can be really bad, because obviously, you can start to think about it. If you're having difficulty breathing, then that's not a good sign for your overall health. 20 milliamps can cause the muscles to become paralyzed and stay paralyzed. Now, what that means is that this is really bad for some people, especially like electricians, and especially even like regular human beings. What they'll do is they'll grab, and it can sometimes also cause your muscles to contract as well. That's just paralyzed, and yeah, or spasm/contract. So what happens is, for example, is if I take my hand, right, and if I touch an electrical wire, what it will do is sometimes it'll cause my hand to spasm and contract. Now, if you contract your hand, what's going to happen is you're going to end up accidentally grabbing hold of the electric wire. So, and if you're grabbing hold of the electric wire because your hand is spasming, then that's going to mean that you're going to receive more electricity because you can't let go. So what electricians tend to do in order to, it's not advised, but if they want to check whether an electric wire is live or not, what they'll do is they'll actually use the back of their hand instead of the front of their hand. I don't know how to. And then that way, if there is an electric shock, then their hand will coil up the other direction. Of course, you can see here I've got a picture of a taser. That's because tasers use that to their advantage. If you can shoot someone with a taser, like a police officer shoots someone who's running away with a taser, then what you can do is you can paralyze their legs, all the muscles in their body. If your legs get paralyzed, they start contracting and you can't run. The first place you fall is the ground. And of course, it's not just that your legs get paralyzed. It's not like, Harry Potter and you cast stupefy and, that's it. You also experience a huge amount of pain. So that's another reason to fall to the ground and stop running. It's not just because you can't control your legs because they're paralyzed and contracting, but because and of course, the longer you experience this, the more it will just stay paralyzed. You keep someone's leg paralyzed permanently by applying a continual electric shock. What can 25 milliamps do? So the highest one out of this list, 25 milliamps, that can cause your heart muscles to spasm. So this is not just your muscles, this is not just your muscles in your leg that's spasming so that you can't walk, or paralyzed so they can't walk. there's actually specific muscles in your heart that can become spasms, and that's called fibrillation. Now, if your heart muscle starts to spasm, well, then it's not going to work as a unit. Remember, your heart is a massive muscle, and so therefore, if one part of it stops working, then the other parts aren't going to be as efficient, so you're not going to get as much blood flow, and then that's of course how you end up having a heart attack. That's why they're called defibrillators, by the way. Now I'm gonna, by the way, I saw this while I was looking up pictures. I saw this, I was like, this is kind of cute. Like, like, I don't know. I was just like, if you're gonna tase someone, you might as well, Hello Kitty brand taser for all those little women out there that want to stay safe. It looks pocket sized too, and it's pink. Like, if you're gonna have a taser, you might as well have a pink taser. Anyway, the last part, I guess, is to talk about where in the body. The direction the electricity goes through your body, or the current goes through your body, makes a difference. Current will usually pass through the path of least resistance. So if you've got a person and they're standing, you've got a person, I'll just do a stick figure actually, and they're standing in the middle and they get shot with lightning, the lightning's going to go, well, the shortest path is to the person's head. And then from that person's head, the next shortest path is straight through their body, down there, through their head, through their brain, their spine, through their chest, and then out one of the legs to get to the ground. That's why when you're in a lightning storm, they usually recommend don't stand under a tree, because trees will attract lightning and then they can jump into you, or it can burn. But yeah, like ultimately, you don't want to stand out in the open either. You just don't want to be anywhere near any of this. So you may have this situation where if you grab, hopefully if you're lucky and you shock yourself and you grab like a wire, let's just say this person grabs a wire, hopefully you get lucky, because what will happen is the current will go down through your leg into the ground like this. The worst possible thing that can happen is if the current goes across your chest. So let's just say, why would the current go across your chest? Let's say this situation occurs. You are standing on a walkway and you have one hand holding, and you've got, this is the electric wire here, and the other hand is holding onto a metal railing. Now what your body is going to do, what the electricity is going to do, the electricity is going to say, well, I want to get to ground in the fastest way possible. I could go from this point, I have two paths. I could go across the body and down this metal railing. Metal is a really good conductor, so I'm not going to lose much voltage here. Or I could go through the person's leg, the path of higher resistance. I'm instead going to go across the body and down the railing. That'd be really bad for this person, because suddenly their heart is in the path of the electricity, and you don't want it to go across your heart. You don't want the electricity to go across your heart. We've already talked about why that's a bad thing to happen. If electricity goes across your heart, then you're probably it's going to cause your heart muscles to spasm, which can give you a heart attack. This is also, by the way, how defibrillators do work, is that when you want to make a defibrillator work, put one pad up at the top left of the heart, one pad usually under the armpit, and then that means that the current, as it goes through the chest, it's only about 20-30 volts, goes through the chest, it'll go through the heart, and that can usually give it enough of a shock that the heart goes, okay, let's start again, let's try and get this right this time, if you've already experienced a shock. I'm going to do this slide tomorrow, and that'd be good. I can use this slide to recap, but I will talk about this very, very, very last slide before I let you guys go. The third thing, so we talked about resistance, So how hard is it for electricity to get in your body? We've talked about current. How much current's going through your body will determine whether it's like a nice little shock or the shock that kind of spasms your body. The third thing we talked about was where it goes. If it goes through your chest, you're probably in a bit of trouble. If it just goes through one arm and out your leg, well, it's going to hurt like a lot, but you won't, hopefully you won't be dead. The fourth thing is time. I want to look at this, and this is the last thing. The shorter the time that you're exposed to electricity, the better. Let's go have a look at this. This is 50 milliamps. This is enough to put you into, this is enough to cause issues to your heart. But if you experience 50 milliamps for less than a second, between 10 seconds and 200 milliseconds, you probably won't experience anything. You'll probably experience a fair bit of pain. You'll probably experience maybe a shortness of breath for a little while, but ultimately it's less than 200 milliseconds, you're probably going to be fine. But if you experience that same current for more than 4 seconds, because 4,000 milliseconds, you're probably going to give yourself a heart attack. So it's the same current, same voltage, AC by the way, because AC is more dangerous than DC. 50 milliamps AC, but because it's for a longer time, it makes a difference. What about these two, the 100 ones? The 100 ones are also the same. 100 milliamps, 100 milliamps. Again, 10 to 100 milliseconds, barely any time at all. That's a tenth of a second. Even though it's 100 milliamps, because it's a tenth of a second, you're probably going to be fine. You probably, no dangerous effects. You probably maybe, again, feel some pain. Maybe you get like a bruise, but you're probably not going to like die. But if it's more than 600 milliseconds, or if it's more than half a second, that's when you're probably going to be in trouble. So again, it's a lot, because it's a lot higher current, it doesn't take much in order to get you fibrillation, but you know, it's still it still means you can survive for a short second. And if you've got really quick reflexes, if you touch something, you quickly move your hand away, then you might be okay. Like you might not actually experience anything. Like if you're really like got ninja reflexes, and you quickly move your hand away, you shouldn't really experience too much. You probably will only experience maybe 100, maybe 200 milliseconds worth of this sort of stuff. It's worth keeping that in mind. The last one, of course, is 500. If you're getting 500 milliamps, there's not going to be much that's going to save you. If you have more than 40 milliseconds, then you're in trouble. So time is a factor. Even once you know, all right, this current's going straight across the chest, this person should die. They're getting 600 volts of current. That's 600 volts. That's bad. They've got something like 100 milliamps. That's bad, but it only gets applied for a tenth of a second. Well, then you're probably going to survive. And that's why static electricity, even the static shocks are like 20,000 volts, because it's only less than a second, less than a millisecond, like maybe like 10 milliseconds you experience that voltage. People don't feel very much. It's actually pretty fine. All right, guys, that's it.